Hello, I'm Alex Jaffe. Thanks for tuning in to DC Action News. It's a fifth Wednesday, which on our cosmic calendar usually entails few new developments. Power Girl returned the human captives of the Lunaria Club safely back to Gotham. The Moon War and time travel traffic continue as last reported. And the Superman family is taking some time off together vacationing in California. For more on these stories, you can follow up on Gotham City Sirens Unfit for Orbit number 5, The Flash number 23, Justice League Dark Tomorrow Special, and DC's California Love. For this week, we're ceding our airtime to our sister historical program, a 52-part investigation of the year following the Infinite Crisis by Earth 33's professional comic book expert Alex Jaffe and professional culture journalist Gita Jackson. In this first episode, our hosts will familiarize you with their bona fides and begin to explain the historical significance of this year without the Trinity. We'll be back next week. Never stop reading comics.
Hi, welcome to 52 Pickup, a podcast about the greatest comic you've never heard of. I'm Gita Jackson.
Hooray!
And I'm joined by...
Oh, and I'm Alex Jaffe. I thought you were gonna... sorry. Can we take that
That's
again?
Fine. Let's take that again.
I thought you were like, I'm Gita Jackson and...
I see where the disconnect happened. So
I thought there was gonna be an and.
Oh, okay. I'll say and.
You don't have to say and. Now that I know there's no and,
okay.
We don't have to do the and. Welcome to 52 Pickup, a podcast about the greatest comic you've never heard of. I'm Alex Jaffe.
And I'm Gita Jackson. And this is our episode 0.
Welcome to the wonderful, marvelous world of 52. This is not a show about the new 52.
No, that is the number one question people have asked us so far.
Yeah.
Is this about the new 52? No, it's about something entirely different. And if you're listening to this podcast, it's because you need a little more background info before we just dive into what 52 is and like what the comic is like. But Jaffe, I think the crowd needs a little banter.
All right.
I wanted to ask you how you're doing today. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm terrific.
Yeah.
You literally caught me at the beginning of this recording. I was catching up on Black Adam. The Christopher Priest series.
Oh, man.
And some Mark Waid Batman Superman. So it's good to know that some of the characters and talent we're going to be talking about in this show are still active players in DC Comics.
Isn't that wild?
And that's kind of the key to what 52 is all about. It's this massive gateway into understanding what DC Comics is. It's not the Batman Company. I mean, it kind of is the Batman Company, but it can be more.
It can be way more than the Batman Company. And as much as I like Batman and have always liked Batman, you know, I watched those Tim Burton movies at a very young age. The way that I got into DC Comics was like through a totally different route. And 52 to me was just sort of like the culmination of like a intense hyperfixation I had on a bunch of characters that exist in the margins. And it made me appreciate the sort of depth of the history of DC in particular. You know, Marvel right now sort of dominates the pop culture spaces because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Naturally.
But of course, you know, they made $1 bajillion and everybody's seen them. You know, babies were crying in the theater about Spider-Man dying, you know.
It's like homework to see them. You're left out of culture if you don't see them.
Yeah, that's how I felt about Endgame in a big way. Like, I did not want to see that movie, but I felt like I wouldn't have anything. Like, people would just ask me how I felt about it, and it would just, well, I don't know. It was the cap on a decade of watching those movies, and now I feel no need to ever go back.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I cashed out right before Age of Ultron. I was like, I don't need to see this.
I didn't see Age of Ultron until much, much later. Number one, because the bloom had gone from the rose for me on Joss Whedon. Like, I wrote, you probably read that article advice about how much I don't like Joss Whedon. And the hate ran strong, and it was already deep in my veins by the time Age of Ultron came out, and all of my suspicions about him were confirmed by why was Black Widow bartending her own party? Why was she doing that, Joss? We'll never know. Doesn't make any sense at all. But I strongly disliked that movie, and I was happy to not have watched it until many years later, extremely stoned in my apartment doing laundry. And that was, I think, the completely appropriate place to watch that. But yeah, people don't know when they look at DC, especially because of how the extended universe for DC has gone, people don't know that there's actually like this rich tapestry of some of the most bonkers characters that could ever possibly be conceived of.
Yeah.
And also that the storytelling for those characters has always been really good.
People make jokes about characters like Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man, or Kite Man, or just like all these weirdos that exist in the margins. Egghead from the Adam West TV show. But like, it's not just weird, campy, bonkers losers. What's cool about DC Comics is that it's been this place where people have been creating whatever wild concept they can imagine in a shared universe where people take over the ideas of the last person who wrote for it. There's this sequential building of mythology that happens over generations where like even the tiniest player will get this emotional arc that may not resolve for 20 or 30 years. And it's all about somebody digging out a favorite character that they discovered as a kid or in some obscure book by a favorite writer that other people overlooked to find their opportunity to bring into the forefront and give them the story they always deserved.
Yeah. And to me, that's always what DC has had over Marvel. For me, I am very interested in these sort of cultural mythologies. People always say that thing like superheroes are like, American myths. That's not really true. It's closer to like a folklore.
Yeah.
But other than Spider-Man, which is, especially in New York, just become a mascot for like Black teenagers, essentially.
Sure.
I feel like DC does give into the folkloric nature of these characters and stories a little bit more. It's a little Pepsi versus Coke, but I am just slightly more interested in the sort of deep back catalog that goes way farther into the past than Marvel has also.
Right. You can kind of see it in the comparative creative mythology behind Marvel and DC. There's one name everyone associates with Marvel, and that's Stan Lee. Mm-hmm. Stan Lee is the guy who cameos in all the movies, the guy who is Stan Lee 'S before every major superhero.
Yeah.
No matter who he collaborated with in creating them, they're all seen in the public eye as Stan Lee creations. There is no such person at DC. There's no like totemic figure who represents Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and The Flash and Aquaman, because it was all a whole bunch of people working on these ideas that came together. And I mean, part of it is that publishers from the very beginning tried to reduce those writers to complete non-entities. And
I wonder if that's ever happened after that.
The only time in history. And Stan Lee somehow got wind of what was happening and managed to become the master.
Hustle.
He got to wear the boot that was crushing everybody.
Yeah.
But if I can go back to not speaking cynically, the idea that there's no person who we perceive of as an owner of DC Comics or the mythology of DC Comics is what suggests the collaborative nature of it. That, like you were saying, the more folklore aspect than the mythology aspect, it's a round robin. People pick up the story where others leave off.
Yeah.
And what's really magical about it is that kind of baton passing. And all the people we see involved in 52 in particular are people who in 2006, 2007 were the most renowned comic book writers in the game.
Yeah.
But they're all writing characters that they themselves did not create. They're all writing characters who they're picking up from some other writer and using what came before them to take them to new heights, to recognize the potential they always saw in them, to give them that spotlight from a supporting character or an obscure experimental character to someone with a place in a larger universe.
Yeah. And it's really remarkable in this series in particular. I mean, I think I am making the case, and I wanted to start this podcast to make the case that 52 is probably the most important comic of this century and the most important comic to DC and how they treat their characters, and especially to how they treat their characters extra materially from outside of the form of comic books. If we look at the characters that James Gunn is casting for in his new DC Comics extended universe, you can tell he is extremely inspired by the kinds of characters that are being used and how they're being used in 52. I think it is like the most incredible thing about it. It is like watching a bunch of people who are at the height of their game just fire at all cylinders with the very little oversight from people that could tell them no. Isn't it wonderful to watch creators actually just use the full force of their creativity in this way? And it's unfortunately so rare in any form of art.
Dan DiDio, who was the editor-in-chief of DC at the time 52 was published, he wrote that the best thing he did for 52 was get out of the way and not interfere with it.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Honestly, 100% right. 52 is miraculous because there are a million ways it could have gone wrong, and somehow it picked the one way it went right.
Yeah.
And it happened despite everything that it was greenlit to be. Now, I don't think we've really talked much about what 52 actually is.
Yes. Before I'm going to tease a little bit more. Before we get into 52, I just want to ask you the question.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, how did you get into comics?
How did I get into comics? All right. When I was just 3 years old, my dad gave me an oversized Treasury edition of Captain Marvel comics.
Wow.
His dad ran a convenience store, a pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
And they sold comics there at the time, if you could believe it. Like,
wow.
There was a time in America where in every store you could just pick up comic books.
What a time that was.
So my dad had that for years, and he gave that to me. And the first page of that first story of Captain Marvel is Captain Marvel throwing Dr. Sivana in prison. Dr. Sivana, kind of the archetypical evil mad scientist who we'll see a lot of in this very book, just kind of muttering to himself, trying to come up with a plan to defeat Captain Marvel once and for all. And once he figures out what he's going to do, he recites a mathematical formula out loud. And through the power of math, is just able to walk through the wall behind him.
That rules.
This astounded me. This was the most incredible thing I had ever seen as a 3-year-old child. And I was ensorcelled by everything that comics could do from that point on.
Yeah.
Obviously, like all millennials, Batman the Animated Series really captured me.
Absolutely. Me too.
Sure.
Yeah.
That brought me into Batman. Which brought me into Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, Superman the whole Bruce Timm, Paul Dini animated universe. And Justice League Unlimited is really the first glimpse I got of the idea that, all these superheroes aren't isolated. They kind of live in the same world and work off each other in interesting ways. And there are all these guys in the margins you haven't heard of, like this fedora wearing dude who doesn't have a face.
Yeah.
And this guy who looks like Superman, but he's coated in metal armor and has a huge hammer.
What are these guys' deals?
Yeah. And 2006 was when Justice League Unlimited went off air. And that very same year is when 52 launched with Steel and Booster Gold and The Question right on the cover. And it was easy, like at that time I was primed to keep following these guys into comics, and it was easy for me to pick which comic I was going to start with. Now, this wasn't the first comic I started collecting. I read a bunch of Superman in the 90s after the Death and Return of Superman. If anyone remembers Alpha Centurion and The Trial of Superman, get to me in the mailbag.
Oh my God.
But yeah, 52 was the one where I really latched on and decided I am going to learn everything I can about these weirdos. And I just have not stopped since.
Yeah, I mean, to the great power and like wonderful benefit of me personally, you know, I genuinely enjoy talking about these characters with you because I feel like we have a very similar perspective on comic books in general. You know, for me, I got into comics. I mean, yes, I was, brain.
Oh, I'm sorry. How did you get into comics?
Well, here you go. Here's the story. It's a little simpler. I got into comics through obviously my brain permanently altered by Tim Burton's Batman films, especially Batman Returns, which got me Bat and Cat pilled from an early age. Michelle Pfeiffer in that fucked up little cat suit. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what did something to me, and I'd never been the same.
Mistletoe could be deadly if you eat it.
Oh, stop. I can't even talk about it. It'll become a podcast about that if we start down this road. But then, I was watching, as you do, in high school, Teen Titans, an incredible Cartoon Network television show.
We record this on the day of the Teen Titans animated series 20th anniversary. In case you want to know when we're doing this in time, I've given you all the clues.
You really are the Vic Sage of this podcast.
Go on, Renee.
It's going to be so cute. I loved Teen Titans, and I did not know where to go for more Teen Titans content. And I was an active LiveJournal user at the time. And if you were of the same age range as me and also into comics, you probably know where this is going. I was a subscriber to the LiveJournal community Scans Daily. And this is me copping to being part of the problem. But there were simply not very many comic book shops, like brick and mortar shops. And we were so far from the era of being able to pick up a comic book in the grocery store anymore. So I have to tell you, I torrented and downloaded huge files of sort of DC history. I read on my computer, avoiding my parents, the entirety of Shade the Changing Man by Peter Milligan. A comic that gets very bad about halfway through, like atrociously awful.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But the first couple arcs are so good. I got deep into Vertigo comics also at the same time because it was what was available at the library. Neil Gaiman was an author at that point in time. Librarians felt very confident ordering, Sandman, trade paperbacks for their newly devised, comic book sections. I know that I was instrumental in getting my local library in my hometown to order manga. So.
I have read Sandman more times than probably any other comic. Like,
oh my God, it's so good.
In college, that first issue of Sandman just absolutely tore my mind open.
The thing about Neil Gaiman is that he is that good. And he knows that he is
annoying.
that good. And it is annoying. It's like, fuck you. Fuck off. How dare you?
The gall, honestly.
God,
other people are trying to live in this world, Neil.
Neil? Come on. But Scans Daily was just truly so instrumental in discovering characters that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. There's this huge thing in fandom. I, come through comics from fandom spaces where you sort of, on LiveJournal, you would sort of like make the case for your favorite character, right? And be like, here's why Tim Drake is the best Robin. And you'd have all these like, full issues basically in your post, not full issues against the rules, but you could like do like 50% of an issue and it was basically the same thing. Of sort of examples of Tim Drake from Young Justice and sort of be like, here's why his interactions with Superboy are so great and like what makes this comic so fun. And you should definitely go read more comics with Tim Drake in it. And I was like, I should read more comics with Tim Drake in it. I should finish reading Young Justice. I should see what's going on with this spoiler character. I should see what's going on with the rest of the Bat family. And I should use Scans Daily as a resource to figure out the history of the DC universe in a pre-fan wiki world. And it felt so good because it was so personal. It was like people really talking to you, the reader, and like really proselytizing for why their interpretations of these characters were most correct, why this particular writer and artist did the best job on this. I remember really getting into Cassandra Cain via Scans Daily.
My favorite member of the Bat family.
And she's the best one.
She's the best one.
She is the best one.
She's designed to be the best one, and she is the best one. It just worked. I could do a whole other podcast about Cassandra Cain, but fortunately that podcast already exists. We're fine. We don't have to do that.
So yeah, I really deeply got into these two different really specific eras of DC Comics, and like it's completely shaped how I see these characters. I really cannot see Batman as anything other than an adult with PTSD that deals with his PTSD by adopting other children with his specific kind of PTSD.
You're reading Batman Wayne Family Adventures, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
That's the most popular Batman comic right now for two reasons. Mm-hmm. Reason number one, it's free. Reason number two, it's great. It's got all of the interactions that people want from Batman and these characters who they want to see the recovery arc,
Right. Right? That's what made the Robert Pattinson Batman good, too.
It's nice not to see Batman stuck in the same place.
Yes.
I will defend Scans Daily. Here is my defense of Scans Daily. Scans Daily is a long game. Sure, it was a resource for a lot of people who could have been buying comics that weren't, but it made lifelong comic readers and comic buyers and comic fans out of them.
Literally case in point myself.
I know literally a lot of comic artists and writers who are part of the Scans Daily community. I will not out them, but there would not be a comic book fandom as it exists right now without that resource.
Yeah.
And there are alternatives to it now. I'm going to plug DC Universe Infinite as a great way to access a huge library of comics, which is a service that comes with its own community. And it's not active in every country. So if you're not, the VPNs are legal. I recommend one of those. But otherwise, I have nothing but respect for people who came up through Scans Daily, because in a world where people were just totally isolated from larger comics communities, where gatekeeping was at an all-time high, where you couldn't really walk into a comic book store without being afraid that you'd be laughed out of it, what other resource did you have?
Yeah.
It was the welcoming place for comic books online. And
it truly gave me the confidence to go into a comic book store and say, I want to read this. And no, I don't want to read the comic you're trying to push on me for whatever reason.
Right.
You know, it made me feel very confident that other people felt the way I did about these characters, and other people liked the same writers I liked. And I picked up 7 Soldiers of Victory because of Scans Daily, and I got really into Zatanna because of Scans Daily, and I got into 52 because of Scans Daily. Like, I started reading it because I saw pages on Scans Daily, and I was like, oh my god, they're actually freaking doing it. Holy shit.
Yeah. That's the thing about 52 in particular. It's like when you go to a comic book store and you're looking at a line of everything a particular universe has to offer, you're going to see a bunch of Batman comics, a bunch of Superman comics. If you're interested in these niche characters that you were introduced to through fandom spaces, it's very hard to track them down through like cover art alone. And you're not really encouraged to flip through comics when you're there. So to see something like 52, which featured all of these way more obscure characters just front and center on the covers of these comics, kind of tempting you, hey, you know this guy you heard about? You can read more about them right in here. That's something that you don't get very often. It's something you got in the Silver and the Bronze Age with titles like The Brave and the Bold and DC Comics Presents, which what they would do is they would take Batman or Superman and team them up with a more obscure character so you would kind of get to learn them.
Hopefully, increase, Yeah,
it was a great way to introduce familiarity to a wider spectrum of characters that this world has to offer.
Yeah, it's like a successful version of what Marvel was trying to do with the MCU television shows, of taking their big hit characters and making them collide with some smaller characters, I think. Yeah. Except the problem with the television shows is that they were bad and boring. So that was the big issue, whereas Brave and the Bold is often very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
talent makes a difference.
It's crazy.
And that's a big part of 52 as well, because 52 is the first of many attempts that DC made to replicate this idea of let's take a comic book where the scope is that we address the entire world and we put it out every week. That's something we haven't talked about yet. And I feel like we should have talked about that up front.
But let's set the scene for 52 and what world the comic book was emerging into in terms of what DC was doing at the time. Well, I guess we'll just say it was a weekly book. That's why it's called 52. There's 52 issues. It came out once a week.
Never missed a day.
It wasn't delayed, I think, ever.
Right.
Which is so wild.
And Geoff Johns was one of the writers.
I know. It just feels unreal when you think about that. 7 Soldiers of Victory was not nearly as long, and its final issue was delayed by 8 months. It was ridiculous.
And Grant Morrison was one of the writers.
I know.
There's no reason this should have worked.
It shouldn't have worked, but especially if you look at the deeply unpopular things that were happening with the DC Comics characters at the time. Let's set this whole thing up. What was 52?
All right.
What was happening in DC when 52 emerged onto the scene?
Let me take you back to the distant year of 2006.
Just feel like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, it technically was.
I aged 300 years since 2006.
2006, DC was doing their second ever Crisis event. It's kind of a joke that we get a new Crisis every couple of years now, but back in 2006, that actually meant something. Infinite Crisis, which was this huge comic, which was being written by Geoff Johns at the time, was about bringing the chickens home to roost from Crisis on Infinite Earths, the huge, ambitious, continuity resetting comic book of 1985 to 86 by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, where he brought different elements that were kind of left as dangling plot threads from the end of that storyline to kind of really check in with how DC as a whole has progressed since the mid-80s and kind of his feelings about how it had become kind of a darker place than it used to be. And comics aren't as good as they were once before. And it's something you'd see a lot of again in Doomsday Clock and Rebirth around 2016, 10 years later.
Boy.
But, you could say that all writers basically just have one story that they find different ways to tell their whole lives. And this is Geoff Johns. He brought this villain out named Superboy Prime, who is the Superboy from a world much like our own, where there are no other superheroes except him. But he is extremely powerful, basically as powerful as all the other superheroes combined. And he gets mad at how the DC universe is progressing, and he gets so mad that he basically punches the walls of reality itself, and all kinds of continuity stuff changes. And everybody has to kind of team up to stop him from wrecking everything. And there are enormous losses, and there are all these other storylines going on in the background, which some of the greatest writers for DC all contributed to. Stuff like the Wonder Woman storyline that Greg Rucka did, and Gail Simone with Villains United really coming onto the scene with setting up what the villain faction is doing leading up to Infinite Crisis.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of played their own part. And if you ask a lot of people, it's those kind of tie-ins leading up to Infinite Crisis that are the best part of Infinite Crisis. And it kind of builds it up to a point where really any event couldn't have been a satisfactory payoff to all the buildup that was going into it. And Geoff does his best. And at the end of it, there are these catastrophic losses. And here's the really nuts thing that DC does. Once Infinite Crisis is over, every single other comic book in the line jumps ahead 1 year later. A year has passed. Everything is different. Nothing you know is the same. The lineup of the teams you're following, completely different. Your favorite characters living totally different lives. Heroes are evil. Villains are good. Cats and dogs living together. And you're left kind of scratching your head. Wait, what did I miss? How did this all happen? And the pitch for 52 was, this is going to be a year of comics where we fill in exactly what happened between Infinite Crisis and 1 year later. Here's how you find out where everyone got from point A to point B. And Keith Giffen, bless his soul, the artist who did breakdowns on every single issue, he said, hey, what if we did it in real time? What if this was a literal, weekly series where every week corresponded to a week of the year? And it was something nobody had really ever done before.
Yeah.
Because it's so crazy that we're not even going to attempt to do it for this podcast.
Absolutely not. No, I put my foot down.
Yeah.
Alex really wanted to do it.
I pitched it.
But I was like, I watched these creators drive themselves crazy while making this comic.
They lost their minds. They absolutely did.
In the work. You can feel it. You can feel a crazed energy coming up from it. In a good way. But I'm getting married this year. So I need to devote some time to that.
Although one of the editors did literally have to go print an issue of 52 on his wedding day so that it could come out on time.
God. Okay.
So that sacrifice has been made before. I'm not saying you have to do it.
Thank
you. Other people would have.
Yes, I know. But I maintain a healthy work-life balance, which is why I'm never going to make it.
And no one in comics ever has.
I've talked to some creators who are like, it is possible to do this without totally breaking your back. I just haven't actually seen any examples of it occurring. Oh, God. Making a comic book is, in many ways, a gargantuan, almost impossible task. That's maybe not worth it for the amount of money that is involved. But if you see something like 52, it becomes even more of a miracle when you know, like, how the sausage is made. Like, I mean, getting 4 people to agree on where to go to dinner is like a task enough for me. Getting them to agree how a year's worth of comic book plot should go sounds like a real miracle. And in many ways was. And I mean, spoiler alert, they kind of just did exactly what they wanted to do and did not necessarily fulfill the brief that they pitched.
Yeah, let me explain this. So they have their assignment, and to make this happen, DC enlisted 4 of the greatest writers that they had access to at the time. They enlisted Geoff Johns, who had just gotten off of Infinite Crisis and had this beloved run on the JSA, where he had kind of reestablished this villain, Black Adam, who was kind of an obscure Captain Marvel antagonist, into this like major forefront, like kind of Doctor Doom of the DC universe. We'll talk about more about that later. They got Greg Rucka, who wrote what I still think is the best Wonder Woman run of all time, who was co-writing Gotham Central, which was this incredible...
It's so good.
Yeah, Gotham Central is basically CSI Gotham City, and that's exactly as interesting as it sounds.
And I've tried to do this comic in a live action form, but no one has done it as good as Gotham Central was.
No.
It just, the Gotham show with Ben McKenzie, you can see the DNA. It's leaching from Gotham Central, and it's nowhere near as good.
No.
It's just not.
Because they don't commit. They don't have that same sense of faith in the premise. They have to undercut it with, what if we threw a little bit of Adam West Batman in here?
Yeah.
And it's just a different flavor.
Yeah, I'm completely with you.
You got Mark Waid. Mark Waid, my hero. Probably the only person who could claim to have read every DC comic ever published and mean it. The guy who wrote Kingdom Come, the 1996 series with Alex Ross.
Classic.
About the kind of apocalyptic end of the DC universe with this like major Christian super dogmatic imagery that kind of blew everybody away. He wrote Superman Birthright, basically the greatest Superman origin comic ever written.
I want to just note that Birthright is also very much the clear, obvious inspiration for the like extra materials, Superman origin stories, like Man of Steel.
Yeah.
It defines the character for modern readers in a big way. It was the definitive origin. Like, it superseded John Byrne's classic post Crisis on Infinite Earths,
Man of Steel
redefinition of the origin. It is now, I think, maybe until we see what James Gunn is going to do, now I think it is how most people think of who Superman is and why he is the way he is.
Yeah. The hilarious thing about that is that Geoff Johns himself wrote a Superman origin story 3 years later to overwrite it. But
okay.
Yeah.
But keep going. Yes. Let's hear more.
Okay. Mark Waid also was the guy who convinced everybody that Wally West is a better Flash than Barry Allen, with that incredible Flash run he did in the 90s. And basically everything that people love about Barry now is stuff that they stole about Wally from Jeff's run.
It's true. Nothing but facts. That's so real. No one gave a shit about Barry Allen after that Wally West run. Like, no one cared one single iota. Nobody wanted him to come back. And we'll get to that in the future.
Sure. Of course we will. And then we have Grant Morrison.
Listen, non-binary icon, just
chaos magic.
I think every comic book sort of publisher needs one gender non-conforming person that believes in magic in a very literal way.
Yeah.
And Grant Morrison's whole legacy is being part of that wave of British writers from 2000 AD that came over in the 80s and wanted to just get real silly with it, I would say. Cohort of of Neil Gaiman, and also a kind of person that would take a look at Alan Moore and be like, I can do this better than him, which is very key, I think, to understanding why they are so like bombastic and over the top and campy. I got into Grant Morrison through their run on New X-Men, which is now considered a classic, and did also, I think, for a lot of readers and definitely for the movies, define how people would see the characters in X-Men. Completely changed how people see Emma Frost, for sure, who to me is an icon, who's like a personal icon. But Grant Morrison at this time, they were doing weird, wild, silly things with deep, deep, deep cut characters. And that has been their passion, to sort of dig through the annals of DC Comics and dredge up characters people thought were very silly and take them dead seriously. The number one being their run on Animal Man.
Sure.
Which will come back in this comic in a big way, where they were not the first person to break the fourth wall in the world of comic books, but I think they are perhaps the most successful at using it as a narrative device and actually making it mean something to the story.
Yeah. Not just a joke, but literally the premise.
Yeah.
They also did it with Doom Patrol.
Yep.
They demonstrated that it's not just C-listers that they have this with when they wrote maybe the most iconic at the time run on Justice League of America. They took over JLA, and they were like, for decades, the team had been kind of this compromise of let's throw together whatever heroes we have access to at the time. And Morrison was like, let's go back to the classic lineup we had in the 60s, maybe update it with the new Flash and the new Green Lantern, but still those mantles all together: Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and Martian Manhunter.
Yeah.
And just treat them like the modern gods. Really, the thing you keep hearing people say, that, comic books are the modern mythology. When they say that, they're quoting Grant Morrison.
Yes.
Grant Morrison was the one who put that idea in everybody's heads.
And they were like halfway joking when they said that. Yeah. But the idea of the JLA as this immutable pantheon, the stuff you see Zack Snyder really like obsessively gnawing on when he's making his little movies, that does come from Grant Morrison. And the thing is, Grant Morrison does that seriousness with levity and humanity, which I think is missing from most interpretations of that idea.
Right. One thing I will say in Grant Morrison's defense, not that Grant Morrison needs defending, is that if absolutely anything could be defined as chaos magic in action, like a spell being performed and successfully working, it's 52.
That's so true.
52 is magic happening in real time. There's no reason it should have worked. They took these talented figures, all four of these totemic individuals, each with their own perspective on how comics work and what their perspective on storytelling is. Geoff Johns was all about big mythology and nostalgia. Greg Rucka was all about these like grounded stories about women having real problems. Mark Waid has always been the DC Comics historian. Let's consider these in larger context, which is why I think he's kind of the spine of this whole book. And, Grant Morrison is the wizard. And they said, what if we took a writer's room approach to writing a comic book rather than have one person write a comic or have people trade off comic duties? We'd set up a phone call. Everybody can work on breaking the story week after week together. This was absolutely unheard of in comics, and it was based on what was going on in media at the time, that we were seeing the dawn of what we now consider the golden age of television.
Yeah.
We were seeing shows like Lost and 24, which 52 is a direct reference to in its title. Like, what if we did a thing that was related to real time?
Yeah.
And let's see if we can take that particular flavor of magic and translate it into the comic medium.
Yeah, this was the dawn of what I think is also called peak TV. So it's like not cable television, but like network TVs, like those big networks pushing a whole lot of money into television shows that would run at now an unheard of amount of episodes per season, like 24, 26 episodes per season.
Right.
And in order to actually pull that off, you do need a room of people all contributing equally to every single episode. And you can see how this approach to writing something really enhanced 52, made it a lot better. Like, you can see a little bit of the grand wizardry of Grant Morrison leaking into the more grounded approach of the other writers, even though you can also very much tell who is in charge of each storyline and what sort of fascinations they have.
Yeah, they never spill it out. And they always claim that they all had their same hands on the ball for everything. But throughout the series, like, oh yeah, that's a Morrison storyline. That's a Johns.
Yeah.
That's a Rucka.
Yeah. It's just some people are so obviously interested in specific characters and have always been that like nobody else would touch them. That's so, especially Grant Morrison, they just love those weird comic book characters that everyone else treats as out of continuity. They love it.
A weekly series is literally 4 times as much work as a monthly series. So you are going to need a writer's room of talent to tackle it without breaking them.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about the real-time aspect of 24. The other show that really influenced 52 was shows that really took advantage of these early internet communities like Lost, where everyone was trying to decipher background clues and figure out what was going on at the same time. And that's where the 1 year later relationship came from, where you had this big mystery of how does the universe get from one place to the next place?
Yeah.
And there was this message they kept repeating in the marketing material of what is the secret of 52? And we'll talk about what that secret was and how they kind of give it away on the first page.
It was genuinely the first thing I thought when I saw the first page. I was like, oh, it would be weird if this thing happened.
And that's exactly what happened. So it's marketed with this idea of, oh, if you read very closely and put together all the clues, there's a mystery to solve. So with all these factors together, A, that it's going to be like a TV show that happens in real time. And B, it's going to start from one defined point to ending at all these different defined points as delineated by the 1 year later storylines that were happening in all the other comics that were being published at the same time. Go forth and make a comic, you giants of the industry. And what they immediately decided was, we're not doing that. No.
And it's so funny. I don't mean I too have gotten people's money and permission and been like, yoink, it's iconic behavior. Slay. I genuinely admire though the level of creativity and work that went into this project. It is like, I am not joking when I say I think it is the greatest and most important comic that it's ever made. I think that through this show and our conversation about it, we will also prove my thesis that the thing that 52 does for DC Comics is what every major crisis event thinks it is doing. You know,
yes.
DC Comics especially invented this sort of ontological move where you use fiction to explain the gaps in the continuity itself.
They've literally been doing that since 1956.
They invented it, you know,
Yeah.
and it's now something that happens across all forms of media, you know, like the movie The Flash that we saw genuinely is trying to do the same move that the original Crisis on Infinite Earths did, which is try to use the movie itself as the missing piece that explains why things will be different in the DC Extended Universe after this film.
Which is like, why do that at all? Why not just start over? And the answer is because they're borrowing the moves from comics like this, which make an interesting story out of that change rather than feel like it has to exist to explain that change.
In its most cynical form, it's also a form of like monetization. We've both read really lackluster DC Crisis events that have just went on and on and on and on to try to get some money out of readers to explain very, very minor continuity errors that don't matter to anybody.
Oh, I love all the DC Crisis events equally.
Moments later, I don't care for Identity Crisis.
I don't care for Armageddon 2001.
We have our least favorite children out there now.
Yeah.
Some of them are real not good.
Which one did you say?
I said Identity Crisis. I have beef.
Oh, we will talk about Identity Crisis. We will talk about Identity Crisis.
You know, I bought it. I bought the trade and I read it and I was like, I don't understand why they had to just take something that was fun and nice and light and make it pure misery. Why did they do that? But we'll get there.
We'll get there.
I have such beef.
Brad Meltzer would tell you that he was creating a narrative arc. You were seeing the downfall, but the rise was in his Justice League series that it was setting up later, that he was going to build the Justice League into the greatest version of the team that you had ever seen before, that one that was reflective of what you saw in Justice League Unlimited, where it was everybody working together on the same page for the first time.
And I'd tell him it's already been done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You can
they
see
decided we're not doing that. Instead, rather than try to explain every single thing that 1 year later does, we're going to take the most interesting thing about Infinite Crisis and build something off of that.
Yeah.
The most interesting thing to these collective writers, on which 52 was predicated, is that after this huge fight with Superboy Prime, Batman is exhausted from all the fallout of Identity Crisis just before it that had ripped the Justice League apart. Wonder Woman is devastated from having to kill somebody for the first time. And Superman has just physically exhausted himself. He went so hard in the fight against Superboy Prime that his powers are just gone. So Superman is just living in Metropolis as reporter Clark Kent because he has no alternative. And both Batman and Wonder Woman decide we're going to take a year off.
Yeah.
We're going to take a sabbatical.
Well-earned break.
We need to figure out what we're about. And a lot of other major heroes do too. Wally West, the Flash, he goes to another world to raise his kids. Green Arrow goes to an island with his whole family so they can train and like pick up new martial arts skills and bond with each other and kind of repair the damage that's been done to his family. All of these major A-list players in the DC universe are kind of taken off the board. And so you're left with a whole year where you're like, well, if anything goes wrong, who's going to deal with it? And what about all these other guys? The magic of 52, the central premise of 52, is that when you push away the huge figures of Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman, I suppose, Wonder Woman could get more play, but that's a discussion for another time.
Yes.
She is spoken of like an A-lister, but not treated like one, is how I'll summarize it.
Yeah.
But anyway, with those major brand names out of the way, you get to see everything else that DC Comics has to offer. You get to see all these other creative ideas that have been struggling to find light under their shade and kind of come forth and use the opportunity to become heroes themselves. And this is when Grant Morrison and Mark Waid and Greg Rucka and Geoff Johns get to pull out all of the characters that they would have been on scans daily losing their minds about were they Gita Jackson's age at the time, and
Yes.
finally tell the stories about them they always wanted to tell and kind of show people in the same way those threads on Scans Daily showcased people's favorite characters. This is why you should care about this character. I'm going to tell you the story why this character is so important.
It does feel like a really rewarding reflection back to the fandom of the writers and artists here being like, we love these characters just as much as you do.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to worry about the big three that just suck all the oxygen out of the room when they appear. You know, there is nothing that sort of deflates any other, powered superhero in the DC universe than Superman showing up, right? He is the sun.
Jerry Seinfeld has this whole routine. Why do you need the Justice League when you have Superman? He's Superman.
I don't want to give him credit for anything but the bars, It's a good question. And it's like the DC universe suddenly becomes a really diverse and wild place when you remove these characters from the equation. And not only that, a lot of different kinds of stories, genres of stories can be told. Each of the main narratives in 52, when we discuss them, you'll see that they really belong to different kinds of genres of story. There's one that's like straight up a pulp noir thing, and it's really narrated and drawn and conceptualized as a noir story. And I've used the word iconic a lot, but it is iconic. It is perhaps the most lasting in terms of the wider pop culture arc of that story. But there's also like a little CW style, conflict with your father type story going on. And there is my favorite story has to do with fame and consequences, which is another kind of genre of story that doesn't get to be told with superheroes very often. It is really thinking about comics as a medium and how diverse the tales we can tell with comic books can be, how broad the idea of a superhero comic can actually be once you get out of your own way with these characters.
Right. We've given people an idea of what 52 is about and who's involved in writing it. There's an enormous team of artists, which we will get into individually as we discuss each issue, because it's impossible to draw a comic like this by yourself. So the list of artists involved in 52 is truly enormous, and we're going to take that as it comes. But let's talk about the characters who are specifically elevated to that spotlight. We've talked about how these writers have taken these characters who don't usually get a lot of oxygen and give them room to breathe. But who are they? Who's getting the special treatment in 52?
So I think my personal favorite arc from 52 is about Booster Gold, which if you are a fan of a show called Legends of Tomorrow, which you probably seen the clip of them going back in time and trying to kill Barack Obama as a teenager.
The giant gorilla trying to kill Barack Obama.
Oh my God, I forgot it was Gorilla Grodd. He was trying to kill Barack Obama as a teenager. That's not even the most ridiculous thing that's happened on that show. I love it. It's very dumb.
John Constantine spends an entire episode trying to erase himself from history by kicking his dad in the nuts. It's a great show.
It's very silly. If you like that show, I think you'll like 52, especially because they cast Booster Gold as Donald Faison from Scrubs, which is brilliant, big-brained casting.
I mean, I think of him as Donald Faison from Clueless, but go off.
Booster Gold is a character he's capitalism in human form, I would say. Yeah. His backstory, generally, I'm not sure if it's been massaged since I've brushed up on it, but he was a football star who fell on hard times and decided to use his superior knowledge of the future to go back into the past and make $1 million bajillion being a superhero because he knows when all the stuff is going to happen. He has a suit that gives him the basic powers that he stole from a superhero museum. And he's also just like a huge blonde bimbo. Doesn't know anything. Just air between his 2 ears and his beautiful blonde hair on top.
Oh, yeah.
I got really into him through Fans Daily, mostly because the users on there shipped him with Ted Kord's Blue Beetle. They had this run in Justice League Europe and Justice League International, which is a very silly humor comic. The idea of Europe needing their own Justice League, am I right?
Yeah.
And those two characters had a somewhat homoerotic friendship, and I really bought into it as only a 16-year-old can. But I was delighted to see him show up in 52. Just simply delighted. And his whole arc really is the sort of fame and its consequences arc. He wants to take the place of Superman because he sees the power vacuum.
See a need, fill a need.
Yeah, but things don't quite turn out the way he wants them to, is the eternal problem of Booster Gold. I also recently watched the Booster Gold episode of Justice League Unlimited, and
great story never told. Yeah,
it's perfect. It's a perfect episode of television. I loved it. I loved that he doesn't have to do cleanup.
Also featuring Elongated Man, who we'll talk about soon.
Oh, I love it.
We don't need two stretchy guys.
It's so funny.
The thing about Booster Gold is he is the perfect character for this comic because Booster Gold's tagline has always been that he's the greatest hero you've never heard of.
Yeah.
He is the definition of a comedic pull for an obscure superhero nobody cares about, to the point that he is famous for being not famous.
Yes.
Sort of an anti-Kardashian in that way.
You know, he's like very much anticipating influencer culture, I feel, and very much now feels like a commentary on it. It didn't exist in the same way it does now, but if Booster Gold was really being written in terms of the popular modern culture, he would be doing brand deals on TikTok and he'd be buying the pink sauce. Like, he would be a scammer.
Oh, yeah.
He would be Caroline Calloway, but with superpowers.
100%. Absolutely as Dan Jurgens envisioned it when he introduced him for the money generation of the 80s.
Yes. It's just
not
evolved.
much has changed. Just the internet has gotten involved.
Yes. It would be like, can you imagine Booster Gold's Twitch streams? They'd be so chaotic.
Oh,
because
my God.
He has a little robot called Skeets that was written before anyone envisioned Lil Jon saying, skeet, skeet, motherfucker. Skeet, skeet, goddamn.
Well, Skeets is from the future, so you could argue that he did know about this.
Booster's just too white to understand what's going on here. Skeets know everything from the future, but he's also a dumb little robot. And he's also, like, Booster's only and biggest fan and his closest friend.
His robot Alfred.
Yes, and he's always giving him his big ups, always trying to make sure Booster feels confident. And it's just very, very sweet that Booster has the energy of exactly one sycophant.
And it's usually enough to sustain him.
Yeah, he doesn't have huge needs. He just wants to live in a penthouse, bang beautiful babes, and have lots of money. I don't know.
And have everyone around him tell him he's great.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
No, that's all any of us want. Please write in to 52mailbag@gmail.com and tell us how great we are.
Thank you. Now, Alex, who is your, I think, top of the line, above the fold character that appears in 52?
Top of the line, above the fold, number one for me. The reason I read 52 in the first place. There's a character in Justice League Unlimited that I immediately fell in love with. An early episode called Fearful Symmetry, which heavily featured Supergirl and Green Arrow, and this weirdo in a trench coat and fedora who don't got no face. And I had no idea what this guy was about. Did somebody steal his face? Was he cursed? Is he some kind of spiritual entity? Is he just kind of a masked weirdo? Yes, he is just kind of a masked weirdo. The thing about the Question, as he has decided to call himself, is that he is the guy who will go after whatever mysteries everyone else is too insane or bothered to go after. If it's too much of a pain to look into something, or if it's too unlikely to have a result, if there's a mystery no one else is bothering to look into, he's the one who is going to bother himself with that grunt work. He is not the smartest detective. He is not the greatest detective. He is not the strongest hero. He is not the most skilled, the most brave, the most anything. But it's his kind of sheer determination of will. The fact that no matter how many times he gets it wrong, he is not going to give up on that journey to find the truth. That really just attracted me to him. He's a guy who will look Superman in the eye and call him out on his bullshit. The guy who even Batman is like, I guess we could put the Question on the case. He's the one who solves the mysteries nobody else wants to. He is the Fox Mulder of the DC universe, essentially.
Absolutely. That is the comparison to draw. He is the one that says, you ever heard of the knife alien? Like, he's Charlie Day in front of the red string wall.
Oh, absolutely. And he wasn't always that character. He was a different character under Steve Ditko, who created him in the 1960s. He was a very, very different character under Denny O'Neil, who reinvented him when DC acquired him from Charlton Comics in the 80s. Because Charlton went bust and they bought a bunch of characters from them. They bought The Question, they bought Peacemaker, they bought Captain Atom, they bought Blue Beetle, they bought Nightshade, Judo Master, a couple of others. But The Question was this kind of Ayn Randian objectivist mouthpiece that Steve Ditko, co-creator of Spider-Man, was hugely about. And he was about never compromising in the face of people telling you you're wrong. And what Denny O'Neil did in his first issue of The Question was immediately kill him off and have him reborn with a spiritual awakening that maybe the world is more complicated than I thought it was. And he adopts this kind of holistic Zen approach to discovering what morality is in a subjective universe. And it's that Question that we meet in 52. Greg Rucka had studied at the feet of Denny O'Neil. Denny O'Neil was the editor of Batman for a very long time. especially when Denny was coming up in titles like Gotham Central and his run on Detective Comics. And they even wrote a question book together. They wrote Batman Huntress Cry for Blood, which is a very important book to 52 in that it kind of chronicles the Question's first attempt to take on a sort of protege, which completely blows up in his face. And it's both Denny and Greg working on that together. And 52 brings that storyline together with everything he had written in Gotham Central and everything that Denny had written in The Question into kind of one final arc that brings the storyline of Vic Sage, The Question, and Renee Montoya, a Gotham City cop who originated in Batman the Animated Series, but Rucka really took responsibility for in Gotham Central, into one storyline. At the end of Gotham Central, Renee Montoya is absolutely devastated. She has lost everything that matters to her. She was outed as gay by a supervillain. Her partner was killed by a corrupt cop. She has just been completely disillusioned with everyone in her life and the police force, and she's left her job. She's drinking. She's cavorting with loose women.
Oh, no. Yeah, she's lost everything. And I think in terms of, this is the story that also feels like a direct continuation from Rucka's work in a very, very literal way. I think it happens like mere days after the end of his run on Gotham Central, which ended.
Gotham Central is a title which was doing very well and just got canceled because Infinite Crisis happened and they wanted to do a bunch of new Batman books. So really the reason Greg Rucka is here in 52 is to write an end to Gotham Central, and that's his quarter of the book.
It's so fucking good. It's really good.
It's, in my opinion, the best quarter of the book.
I think so too. I think it's the most, I think as we continue to talk about this, I think it has had the highest impact on DC Comics in terms of its material changes and like bringing characters from 52 into the broader canon. And those characters have ended up being really, really popular with fans and more casual fans, to the point that there was a Batgirl television show that feels very influenced by 52 and the portrayal of a particular character in 52. And I also just think
Batwoman.
She's not a girl. She is a woman.
Right. But dissimilar to Britney Spears.
She's made it past that hump.
Yes.
Yeah. No longer at a crossroads here. But I think it's feels the most whole because you can feel Greg Rucka just defiantly ending his comic book.
Yes. You know? No one can take this from me. And from the Question's perspective, he had just gone through this failure of trying to bring Huntress back from the brink of despair, and he finds Renee Montoya in a similar place and thinks, maybe I can do for her what Richard Dragon, the person who trained me when I was an objectivist freak and alienated everything that was important to me, did for me back then. He wants to pass on that change of character to someone else for reasons which will become clear as the comic progresses. And they find that in each other and become the Mulder and Scully of the DC universe for a year. And it's the best thing ever. I
just want to flip my desk. It's so good. I'm just screaming, crying, throwing up at how excited I am to talk about this arc, because it is genuinely, like, I think it is such a loving tribute to Pulp Fiction and noir. It's really the origins of Gotham in terms of DC Comics and historically where these characters find their origins. And I think it's just a beautiful encapsulation of everything that makes DC Comics good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Question's my favorite guy.
He's good.
My favorite guy of all guys in the entire DC Comics universe.
You're ready to fight.
Number one with a bullet.
Yeah. So next, the hierarchy of the DC universe is about to change.
Oh, baby. Here we go.
So if you want to know why there was a Black Adam movie, it is because of 52.
No question.
And it is because Black Adam was a major player in 52. And as you've, why don't you tell the story? You know it better than me. What happened when people saw the Black Adam portrayal in 52 in the broader fandom? And how did that infect the mind of a particular wrestler turned movie star?
Okay. Let me start a little earlier in the year 1945. Just a little bit. So So 1945, in the 1940s, Captain Marvel is an extremely popular superhero. He is more popular than Superman, regularly outselling him. And he's so popular that there are multiple Captain Marvel titles going on. There's Captain Marvel starring Billy Batson. There's Captain Marvel Jr. with Freddie Freeman. There's Mary Marvel, which is the first superhero comic featuring a young woman. And they eventually come together for this title called Marvel Family, which would be kind of their Justice League of all the Captain Marvel family characters teaming up to take on these bigger threats. And the first one they fight is this guy they introduce. We find out Billy Batson was not the Wizard Shazam's first champion. The way Captain Marvel, now called Shazam by people, works is that he was a kid who was chosen by a wizard to fight all of the evils of mankind, to embody everything that's good about humanity. And to do that, he says the word Shazam and he transforms into Captain Marvel and he goes and superheroes around. But we learn in Marvel Family #1 that he wasn't the first person to get those powers. The first person was this guy named Black Adam, who 4,000 years ago, the wizard chose as his first champion. He went mad with power, took over Egypt, was banished to the depths of the universe, and now he's come back, and they have to beat him. And that was literally the last we saw of him for 30 years. He shows up once in the 1940s, and then never again until like 1977, which is when DC had sued Fawcett out of oblivion and took the characters for themselves. Black Adam gets reintroduced as this kind of another member of Captain Marvel's rogues gallery to kind of fight him along with Mr. Mind and Dr. Savannah, those guys. And then we get to Geoff Johns in the dawn of the 20th century. He's revamping the JSA, and he has an agenda. His particular agenda is, we need more prominent Arab characters in the DC universe. Totally understandable. I get it.
Not wrong.
Not wrong. And he's like, you know who would be a great person to put at the forefront of the entire DC universe? That guy Captain Marvel fought one time in 1945. And then just kind of became a sort of C-list anti-Captain Marvel.
Geoff Johns, your mind.
Yeah.
Such a big-brained move, but incredible results.
So what he does is he goes through this complicated arc, which explains that maybe Black Adam wasn't such a bad guy after all, and he had the best of intentions the whole time, and there were all these outside influences corrupting him, but he's got his own sound mind now, and the JSA decides to give him another shot. This is all going on in Geoff Johns' 2000s JSA run. And at some point, Black Adam decides, you know what? I think I'm just going to be Dr. Doom. I'm going to go back to my ancestral homeland, which is no longer Egypt. It's a fictional place called Kahndaq now, which is kind of located somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula. And I think between Egypt and Israel is where it's supposed to be, according to most people.
Okay.
It shifts.
Yeah.
There are a lot of fictional countries in the DC universe. Kurt Busiek wrote a great comic about it once, where in a crossover between JLA and Avengers, they observed that actually the DC Earth is slightly bigger than the Marvel Earth because there are all these different fake countries.
That makes so much sense. Also because there's 3 New Yorks in America. You know? 3 New Yorks and 2 New Jerseys. Like,
3 New Yorks and 2 New Jerseys. 7 brides for 7 brothers.
Yes.
Yes. That's the DC universe for you. So he decides, you know what? I'm going to retake my country by force. I'm going to throw out the dictator who took over it, and I'm going to rule it and enforce justice the old Kahndaq way. And he takes a few sympathetic members of the JSA and associated heroes with him, and they just take over Kahndaq together. And he has this big smackdown fight with the JSA, and they basically end up going, you know what? We don't really have any jurisdiction here. These are your people, not ours. You do Kahndaq your way and we'll do everything else. Just stay out of our way. And that's where Geoff Johns' big 52 storyline picks up. Black Adam is now the de facto supreme ruler of Kahndaq, and he is ready to take his Middle Eastern nation to the world stage and demonstrate his particular brand of justice and morality to the universe. Yeah, the hierarchy of power is literally about to change.
As a slight sidebar, like, remember in 2006, we were very much in the War on Terror
That's
arc
correct.
of America. So this was a really bold reimagining of this character at the time, and a little spicy also.
Yeah.
Because it's very anti-villain.
We forget this was like right in the heart of the Iraq War.
Yeah, it was happening.
This was Bush's America.
It was a weird time to be alive. It was a time where my mom recommended I don't check out books about Abby Hoffman from the library because the Patriot Act just passed. It was rough. And this is like a very much an anti-villain sort of imagining of this character that played directly into American politics at that time, topics we'd all be talking about. But here's the thing about Black Adam is he is a sort of like tan, olive-skinned, I would say, tall guy with a wrestler's physique and a bald head and also very expressive eyebrows. Does this remind you of anyone, perhaps?
It certainly reminded Wizard Magazine of people.
Oh my God.
It certainly reminded a certain pro wrestler who was trying to break into cinema with movies like The Scorpion King of somebody. Yeah. So a lot of fan spaces at the time were saying, hey, you know who would be a great Black Adam in a movie? This is around 2007, just as 52 is wrapping up. If we were to make a movie out of this, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would absolutely nail it. And he became the fan cast for Black Adam in like the same way that Glenn Danzig was Wizards fan cast for Wolverine for like 20 years.
That's so funny.
It's just like irrespective of acting talent, let's just pick the guy who kind of looks like our guy.
They weren't wrong. It is like a carbon copy visually, but well, let's just keep going with our tale. Yeah. I have lots to say on that.
Dwayne really took it seriously. He's like, heck yeah, I want to be the star of a superhero movie. And even as early as like 2007, 2008, there were plans to like do a Black Adam thing. And those kind of languished in development hell for a long time because who cares about Black Adam until Dwayne Johnson became such a huge star thanks to the Fast and the Furious franchise with all these different Disney movies he got involved in. He became the number one movie star in America to the point that he convinced the world that it didn't matter who he was playing. If he was playing it, people would come to see it. And that's how a Black Adam movie happened. Last year.
Like, again.
Remember that?
We answered that question, It's sort of like he asked the question, and now we have the answer. Nobody cared. It is incredible how much, not even the comic itself, but just this idea that there could be a visual, like a movie version of this character, obliterated The Rock's mind. Like, it just destroyed him. And it did cause him to use up, I think, the rest of his clout with WB. Like, he no longer has any moves to play.
The moves are done.
As a star. It's done.
Fast and the Furious got their guy back. They got Hobbs back.
He's so mad about all of this. I hope he never listens to this podcast.
The Rock? I hope he listens to this podcast.
We'll tell him like it is, Go make a bad rap song about it. I don't care.
Yeah. You think he can't take it? Come on.
I can smell what The Rock is cooking.
We're podcasters.
Go cry into your millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Please. All right, next in the dramatis personae, we have Elongated Man, aka Ralph Dibny, who did show up in that JLU episode with Booster Gold.
We don't need two stretchy guys, which here's the story behind that.
Yes.
Only reason Elongated Man exists is because in 1960, John Broome did not know that DC had the rights to Plastic Man. Plastic Man was created by Quality Comics, a publisher that DC had acquired at the time. And Broome wanted to tell a Flash Plastic Man story, but he thought, well, we don't have the rights to Plastic Man, so I'll create my own Plastic Man. And that's how Ralph Dibny was introduced back in The Flash number 112. And only after it came out, they were like, that's great, but you really could have used Plastic Man. We have Plastic Man. But too late. Now we have two stretchy detectives in the DC universe. And Elongated Man gets shipped off to Detective Comics in the 60s, where he becomes a crime-solving duo with his wife, Sue. And what sets him apart from everyone else is that he doesn't have a secret identity. That was unheard of among superheroes at the time. He was frequently billed as the only superhero without a secret identity. Everyone knows he's Ralph Dibny. And he goes around saying, hey, he was kind of the Booster Gold of his day, where he was going around saying, hey, it's me, the famous Elongated Man, and just nobody cares.
He had sort of the thin man dynamic with his wife, Sue.
Oh, absolutely Nick and Nora.
It was very much Nick and Nora. It did feel like a real tribute to screwball comedies of that era, where he had his nose would twitch if he smelled a crime, that kind of
Sue's
thing.
like, oh boy, here we go again.
Yeah, it was real adorable times. So unfortunately, in this comic book 52, Ralph Dibny enters the arena after having gone through unimaginable personal tragedy.
It is comedic how much the universe has just decided to dump everything terrible that could possibly happen to a person onto Ralph Dibny.
I don't want to burn Pod on the first episode, but like in one of his first appearances in 52, he's literally putting a gun in his mouth. Upsetting.
Oh my god, it's so upsetting.
He went through it because of Brad Meltzer.
We're picking up from Identity Crisis, where the whole thesis is, superheroes have adult problems too. It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
Elongated Man's wife was raped and then killed. His mind completely breaks, and they think it's a supervillain, but it's actually another superhero's ex-wife who had lost her mind, who kills her.
Nonsense.
It's just not a good story for women in general.
All the women really have a bad time.
Yeah. Ralph Dibny was one of Mark Waid's favorite characters. And just like Greg Rucka came into this with a mission of finishing Gotham Central, and Geoff Johns came in with a mission of promoting Black Adam like he's Vince McMahon trying to promote his new top tier wrestler. The Mark Waid story here is, I want to do the redemption of Elongated Man. But he stretches it out, much like Elongated Man himself, in such a way that it just feels like more torture porn for the entire series. And if you don't have the patience to see where Mark Waid is going with this, which doesn't really resolve until the very last issue, then you're in for a bad time.
It is the conclusion is very much like Saw music playing, however that song goes, where it's like you see flashbacks of everything you thought was just more misery actually meaning something. I do like the resolution of this plot arc, but it is like getting hit in the face with a hammer.
If I can defend Mark Waid, a man who does not need defending, to parrot myself from earlier, that is exactly how every classic Elongated Man story worked. Every Elongated Man story, there's this mystery from the very first page that just absolutely baffles you for the entire story, and it's not explained until the very, very end, at which point you're either like, oh, or really? That was it?
Yeah.
Depending
this
on...
one hopefully is more of an oh rather than a really. I think so.
Yeah, this is the biggest Elongated Man setup and payoff ever told.
Yeah.
And that's what Mark Waid set out to do. And if you're willing to trust Mark Waid that it's all leading somewhere, then you're in for a good time. Yeah.
Next on our list is Steel, and this is, to me, the most CW of these stories arcs that we have going on here.
After the question, this is my favorite.
Yes. This is not just Steel, it's Steel and Natasha, his niece.
Who is also secretly the queer protagonist of this book.
Yes.
We don't know it yet, but later, Natasha Irons will come out as bisexual, and there was a lot of subtext about that before this book, where she was in kind of a throuple with Tracy 13 and a very short-lived Supergirl named Cyril.
I liked both of those characters so much, and they did not really do anything with them. Tracy 13 is adorable.
Tracy 13 is great. They're together in the comics right now. They're girlfriends again.
Oh my god, yes!
Yes.
Yes!
They're great.
I'm so happy!
Yeah. It's absolutely 100% canon. They broke up for a little, but they're together again now. It's great. Yeah. They're very cute.
Cyril, it's best if you just don't look into that. Yeah. Just pretend she's doing great.
Yeah.
Like, don't ask any questions.
Don't ask.
You will not be happy about the answer.
We might do a podcast about Cyril behind a paywall or something.
Oh god, it's tragic.
You could get me to talk about Cyril for money.
We could talk about all the different iterations of Supergirl post-crisis, and we would have a podcast.
We could talk about Matrix. Dear God.
Oh my God. Again, like missed opportunities here. Like, made me very mad.
Another big Scans Daily character, as I remember.
I know. I read that arc of Supergirl because of Scans Daily.
Yeah.
Also.
The whole like Earth Angel, Linda. We're getting way off topic here.
But, Steel is very much a CW pilled. It's very much sort of like what the Flash and Arrowverse versions of the DC Comics shows. It feels very inspired by this because it's very much about one generation versus another generation, very much about the needs and desires of young people versus the needs and desires of people who are older than them. And although the comic does not always successfully take Natasha's point of view seriously, I think that it wants to. It wants to have her perspective be as respected as her father's her uncle's perspective is. I keep thinking that they're not uncle and niece, but father and daughter because they are written that way.
Yes, it's much like Barbara Gordon and James Gordon were uncle and niece for a great part of their publication history. It's treated like a father-daughter relationship.
Yeah.
Steele is the closest thing to a father Natasha has.
Yes, absolutely. And the struggle that they have feels very much in the vein of a young adult novel, where she is trying to come into her own and she sees her uncle's reasonable objections as being trying to stifle her. And she makes some mistakes and learns and grows. And this will also, this is very much the what's going on with the Superman's people part of the book.
Yes.
And I think it works really well.
Right. I think what the Steele storyline puts a really fine point on is that thematically 52 from its very conception is a spiritual sequel to one of the greatest DC events of the previous decade, Reign of the Superman.
Yes.
Where Superman is killed by Doomsday, as everybody who read comics or didn't read comics at the time knew. It was covered by the news. And these 4 people who all claim to be Superman in their own way rise up out of the woodwork. And they're like, well, without Superman, what are we going to do? And it's sort of 52 in miniature in that we have these heroes you've never heard of before who take up the emblem. We have people who turn out to be villains. We have all these different people trying to fill the niche of Superman, and in that journey of discovery, finding their own place. And 2 of them turned evil. There was Eradicator and Cyborg Superman. One of them is dead, Superboy, the clone of Superman. He died in Infinite Crisis. And that just leaves Steele. And Steele is here to represent that sort of, well, with Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman gone, who's going to take their place? And Steele is like, I guess it's up to me to step up. But Natasha's like, no, you had your time, old man. It's my turn now.
Yeah. The Reign of the Superman is, I think, to non-DC Comics fans, it's hard to describe how much fun that whole arc was and how cool it was.
It's still good. It holds up.
It really, really does. I think the reveal of Cyborg Superman being evil is incredibly well done, and he's really scary when he turns evil, which is rare.
The most interesting part of Reign of the Superman for me is all of the different characters throughout the DC universe kind of allying themselves with one Superman or another. Like, that's Superman to me.
Yes.
And what really typifies Steele for me is a scene he has with Lois Lane, where Lois is like, this is the only person not explicitly claiming to be Superman. He's like, I'm not Superman, but Superman saved my life one day, and he told me that if I'm going to keep on living, I should make it count. And that's what I've dedicated my life to. And she's like, spiritually, this is who Superman is. The one without any powers, just doing his best.
Yes, that's a very Clark Kent-ass thing to say. For me, I was a Scans Daily reader, and they were big Superboy people. Superboy was in Young Justice, which I read all of and love. He was then in the very depressing Teen Titans follow-up that came later.
We're going to see a little bit of that here, too.
Yeah, I was rooting for my boy so hard, and when he died in Infinite Crisis, I was inconsolable. It was terrible for me.
That was a compromise.
Because they were going to kill my other boy.
They were going to kill Nightwing.
And I was like, okay, if it meant Nightwing lived, then I guess it's
Geoff Johns literally put down his pen and said, I am not writing this if I have to kill Nightwing.
Dick Grayson's just too important. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Can you imagine, Bruce would never recover from that. That would mean radical changes to Bruce Wayne as a character that I just don't think
he got over Jason Todd.
It's different with your first, okay? That was his eldest son. I don't think he would have been okay.
I could talk about the dynamics between Batmans and Robins all day.
That's a whole other podcast.
That is a whole other podcast. I will just say up front, Jason Todd is the best Robin, and leave it at that. And
wow. Them's fighting's words. We're about to get a whole bunch of emails.
Oh, yeah. If you want to email me about who the best Robin is, go ahead. Unless you say Jason, you're wrong. Oh, baby.
All right.
Where were we? Right. The other half of the Steel storyline, as we will see, is Lex Luthor.
Yes.
Lex Luthor, his entire life has been saying, if only Superman was out of the way, if only I didn't have to deal with Superman, then I could do so much good for the world. Well, now's your chance, buddy. And we're going to see that.
Yeah, the universe was like, bet.
We're going to see that, and
Yes.
it's so good.
It's some really, really good Lex Luthor writing. Also, some I know that people say Superman has people have said this often, and I've never agreed, but they have said that Superman has a bad rogues gallery, and I just don't agree at all.
Surely
because Lex Luthor is a different kind of embodiment of capitalism, not the desperate hustle and grind, but the self-satisfied, smug success of capitalism. It's so well expressed here, and I think there's just a million different ways you could go with that idea.
We are going to talk a lot about Lex Luthor on this show, and the way he embodies the very first enemies that Superman faced in the golden age of Superman comics before supervillains even existed, where his villains every month were corrupt war profiteers and lobbyists and just people who put their workers in unsafe conditions so they could profit off of them. These are literally all stories from the first year of Superman comics, and they all kind of come to life in the figure of Lex Luthor. He is the oldest villain. He is the villain of America. He is everything that stands in opposition to the champion of the oppressed, which is how Superman was referred to way back in Action Comics #1. And we're going to see a lot of that in this comic. This is Lex Luthor. This is like, I'm sure Morrison had something to say about this because it's so their Luthor from on All-Star Superman.
The places that they take Superman when they got their chance to run that book and on All-Star Superman, which to me is the definitional Superman story at this point. But I know it's so bombastic, it's so out there, it is so taking every single aspect of Superman and making it canon in the same way that they would do for Batman that it's kind of a lot to all read at once.
It is a lot.
Yeah, but I think it's
not some star Superman, it's all star Superman.
Yes, exactly. God, it's good. It's good. I think that you can definitely see the benefits to having a writer's room in this Steel, Natasha, Lex Luthor plot, because you can definitely see like just the writers that had the history plus the writers who had the vision really coming together in a really aligned way.
All right. Those are our 5 main characters. There are groups of characters who have significant roles throughout the series who kind of bunch together to move the plot along or tell this crazy story out in space that Grant Morrison mostly has control over. Do we want to get into that, or do we want to save that for like when they're really important?
Let's mention them in a broad sense. We don't have to get into the specifics here, but I just wanted to mention the Space Heroes had what I think was for a lot of Grant Morrison fans a really exciting prospect, which was Grant Morrison writing Animal Man again.
Sure.
Is it successful? Who's to say?
I think literally we are. I think that's our job.
Well, the answer is no, but we'll get to it. And then Oolong Island, this is really just Grant Morrison having a fun time.
I love Oolong Island.
It's so silly.
I mean, I've always been kind of a little bit of a Grant Morrison skeptic, to put it politely.
Yeah.
But when we get to Oolong Island, for the most part, when it's not being weirdly racist, I'm like, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. There's a bunch of this stuff where Grant Morrison is trying their best to be multicultural, but also is just one Scottish person.
Yeah. They're being multicultural in the same way that Disney's It's a Small World is multicultural.
Yes, I think that's the nicest way to put it, basically. It's not bad ideas, but they're also bad ideas.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the caveat to Morrison's philosophy of everything is canon is especially the super racist stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. But those are our cast of characters. And these characters have existed in perpetuity, you know, behind 52 as a comic and also come out of 52. And some of them have been able to find new audiences. Booster Gold definitely got an upshoot in popularity because
he's
of 52.
Getting a TV show.
I can't believe it.
It's going to be so good. Like if there was ever a character created for James Gunn to like make a TV show of, it's Booster Gold.
So real. And I know the casting will be immaculate.
Oh, absolutely.
I was really sad we didn't get more of Donald Faison, but I just know the casting so far for James Gunn's DC Extended Universe projects have so far just been...
Mrs. Maisel as Lois Lane, are you kidding me?
Are you kidding me? Are you actually kidding me? That's just perfect. There's no other actress it could have been.
Nathan Fillion, not as Hal Jordan, but Guy Gardner is the most hilarious thing he possibly could have done.
And then Anthony Corrigan as Metamorpho.
Oh my God, that's going to be so good.
It's going to be so good. And it's also the glow up that actor deserves after Barry.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm very, very excited for this. And I just think if you are a person, if you don't even want to read 52, but you want to know what it is that turns James Gunn's brain on fire when he thinks about DC Comics as a universe. So something that was considered lame compared to Marvel for a very long time. Please listen, we will explain it. He is definitely in sync with us in terms of what he thinks is good about DC and the characters he likes. And I just feel so privileged to have someone with taste in charge.
It's so rare.
It really is, even for the comic publisher itself.
All right, this is sort of a zero episode where we went over the talent and characters involved in episodes after this. We're going to be talking about page for page what happens in the actual comic and kind of analyzing it. But this is the point where we would get into our post-discussion segments. And for the first one, we're going to the blackboard. Now, here's what the blackboard is. There's going to be this recurring motif we'll see in 52 of a blackboard in a character named Rip Hunter's lab, which has all of these insane half fragments of story ideas on them, these clues to storylines that may or may not pay off in 52, possibly in other titles happening at DC at the time, kind of feeding into that original Lost premise of follow the clues and you'll see what's going on. And what we're going to do at the end of every episode is take what we've discussed and link it to cool stuff in the DC universe that it refers to, or stuff that it has inspired, ways that those stories have paid off, or ways that that story is informed.
Yes. And for me, without the context of the first issue, there is one thing that I want to throw up on the blackboard.
Yeah.
In the first issue of 52, there is a huge spread of basically a bunch of different DC heroes that were not the big three or their immediate allies.
Sure.
And there's one particular character that stuck out to me that gave me a moment of hope, and then I've never seen this character ever again, basically. And it is the Ray. What is he doing there?
Oh my God. The Ray absolutely stood out to me too. Here is why the Ray is here. And this is my personal take. We'll talk about this more in our next episode, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But when the Ray shows up, he's specifically kind of having this emotional reunion with Black Canary.
Yes.
The Ray and Black Canary had this very platonic friendly relationship with each other in the Ray's own series, which lasted for 2 years, which was written by the great mono-named Priest.
It's a great book. It's very fun.
Priest decided he would take the Ray and try to make him an A-list hero, or a hero at least worthy of concern in his own right, when he was always kind of relegated to being part of Uncle Sam's freedom fighters. And I think the reason the Ray has a prominent moment in this scene is because of all the Steel stuff. Mm-hmm. Everything that we're seeing with Steel, his relationship with Natasha as we know it was defined in Priest's Steel run in the 90s. It was the last time that Steel had a book to call his own, that run. And for a lot of people who were reading Steel at the time, other than random cameos in other Superman books, this is the first time that he's getting a spotlight. So that Ray and Black Canary scene is an acknowledgement of the work that Priest has done and how the essential building block of the DC universe, that it's writers building on the work of the writers who came before them.
Yeah, the Ray does also have he would have known Superboy, having been a member of Young Justice for a brief period of time.
Sure.
He is part of this sort of younger generation of hero that at the time was sort of a breaking through into their own comics, into the new continuity. It wasn't necessarily something that they would maintain, but it's a gesture towards this idea that Superboy had his own cohort of people that would have missed him and wanted to commemorate him.
What I want to throw on the blackboard, both of us know this is not going to be the last time that DC would try to replicate this weekly formula of trying to put out a new issue every single week for a year. But what a lot of people don't know is that it also wasn't the first time. In 1988, DC made the decision to make Action Comics into a weekly title. And for that year, Superman had one story in it sometimes, and characters like Nightwing and Wild Dog and Phantom Lady and Etrigan and Hal Jordan, as once again written by Priest, and the Blackhawks, and all these characters who don't usually support their own titles got to have a space in an anthology like Action Comics used to be in the Golden Age. It was the first Action Comic stories where Superman was one story, but you also had like Zatara in there and Pep Morgan and a bunch of other characters that nobody remembers anymore. And so for a year, they were like, let's use this title to showcase more of the DC universe. But it didn't have that cohesive narrative of everyone living together in the same world. I think it came together once for that in like one issue. But other than that, they were all kind of isolated and were telling their own stories. This is kind of a sequel to that idea, but with a much grander ambition. And if you want to check that out, that goes from Action Comics number 601 to 642. So it almost made it a year.
Almost. It's hard. It's hard to do.
It's hard. It's a miracle.
Yeah, it's a miracle that comics come out on time on a monthly basis. And often they don't.
Right.
So you really have to count your blessings.
Just ask many of the writers involved in this series.
Absolutely. Gosh. So the next segment that we have doesn't have a name yet. And if you have any good ideas, please send them to the mailbag. But it's just our favorite character / plot beat. And we went over all of our characters in the Dribbler introduction to who's actually in this comic a little while ago. But let's just reiterate. What do you think of all of the the characters that are working in this book? What is your favorite character? I know the answer for you.
It's Vic Sage. Vic Sage and Renee Montoya. I have a lot of love for the Steel plot. I think as a story, the Steel story is, I would say it has my favorite resolution of all the stories. It's the biggest moment in the book, the way it kind of comes together. But that Question story is special to me because it's kind of like the Lamort to Arthur of the Question's whole saga, where it kind of wraps everything up. And the way I kind of experienced personally Vic Sage's story backwards, where I read this and then I went back to the Question series by Denny O'Neil in the 80s, and then I went back to the original Steve Ditko stories in the 60s. This is really where my love for the character and the universe were kind of entwined in the same package. And it's why I just completely lose my mind the 3 times he shows up in the background of a panel in a comic every year.
Absolutely.
He's my little Blorbo.
He's your little Blorbo.
I want to ask you, Gita, since we're talking about DC on a global level this episode, forget 52. Who is your favorite DC Comics character?
Good Lord. Okay.
I think I know the answer.
That is such a hard question to answer, honestly. It really is. Because every time I read a comic book, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite, I read Seven Soldiers, which I reread occasionally, and I'm like, Zatanna's the best. Obviously, no one's better than Zatanna. And then I reread Batman and Son, I'm like, I love it when Dick Grayson is Batman. I love his relationship with Damian. When I really sit down and think about why I started reading comics, what means the most to me, what storylines I could go back to again and again and again. It's so hard. I think it might be chaos bisexual Tim Drake.
No!
It might be.
Are you sure?
It might be that little baby boy, the little hacker boy went by Das Boot when he was hacking into the Batcave. I like the Robins. I really, really, really do. Wait, who is your guess for me? Because
Lois Lane!
Fuck. Lois Lane. See, this is what I mean. Every time I think about a comic book character I like, they become my favorite. I thought about Tim Drake for 1 second, and I was like, he's the best. Nothing he's done has ever been recreated. Iconic behavior. Should be a guest judge on RuPaul's Drag Race. I love him. And then I think about Kara Zor-El for 1 second, and I'm like, icon. The best character that's ever lived. The only character in the entire world. The character of all time. And then I think about Lois Lane, and I'm just, you know what? You're right. It is Lois Lane.
It's gotta be Lois.
It is Lois Lane.
Vic Sage's favorite DC character is Lois Lane.
Just Lois Lane is a superhero, but she doesn't have a secret identity. She's just a journalist.
She's like Elongated Man that way.
I love her. I think she's never done anything wrong.
No, she's the best. There's the reason Superman lost his mind over this woman.
Oh my God. It's like, to me, it's what makes Superman work as a character is Lois Lane.
It's a love story. It was always a love story. She's there from Action Comics #1.
It's always a love story. And like every time someone's like, well, what if Superman was evil? I'm like, it wouldn't happen because Lois Lane is there to freaking knock some sense into him. Lois Lane does everything Superman does and believes in everything that Superman believes without having superpowers.
To be fair, a lot of those what if Superman was evil stories start with, well, Lois is dead.
Yeah. She's the essential glue that's holding him together. Like it's very true that without her, he's basically nothing. He's just some guy that has like laser beams in it that shoot out of his eyes. It's a lot like what if Goku did not get hit on the head when he was dropped off from Namek? You know, the answer to that question is unpleasant.
I think this does a disservice to Pa and Ma Kent. I think they did a lot here that we're not giving them credit for.
Fair, but I'm going to give that credit to Lois. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I love her too much. It's true. Clark Kent really is simply a country boy that loves his Bible, but Lois Lane is just, it's the example he's following.
Yeah.
You know, he wants to be just like her.
She's everything he loves about humanity.
Yes. I can't believe I forgot about Lois Lane. I'll blame that on having ADHD.
Yes. Nowadays, everybody want to talk like they got something to say. It just comes out. They're moving their lips. It's just a bunch of gibberish.
Forgot about Dre. I forgot about Dre.
I forgot about Lane.
Goodness me.
52, episode 0. Forgot about Lane.
That is our title for this episode. We have one more thing prepared, and I'm so excited about this. We have a mailbag. I can't believe we have questions already.
That's how popular we are. This episode doesn't exist yet, and we're already getting listener mail. It's inconceivable. We already have fans, and there is no possible way they have listened to this unless they are literally Booster Gold.
Yes.
Unless they're like, they have a headphone jack plugged into Skeets.
Yeah. NSA, don't listen to this. No spoilers.
All right. I'll read the questions. I picked out 2 from our mailbag. We had considerably more. I had to pick these out. Apologies. I do read every question, but we can only feature a couple. Our first one is from James, who says, you might cover this on the show, but 52 is often talked about as the only weekly or twice monthly comic that worked. Is that attributable to the core 5 people? Waid, Rucka, Morrison, Johns, and Giffen on layouts, if memory serves? That's correct. Or another set of factors?
You know, I have my feelings on this. I think, one, it is the TV writer's room model that allowed them to really spread the work around in a way that made sure that even though they were frantically all trying to get this out on time, the work was spread around a lot more. You know, it's a rising tide lifts all boats, you know, that kind of thing. I also think it's not luck exactly, but it was the exact right time for all of these creators to do something like this. They all had a story that they really wanted to tell, and they found the perfect form to tell it in. And sometimes that kind of creative confluence only comes together at a particular time. You know, there are many weekly comics outside of America that run, but they basically kill their creators. You know, stuff in Shonen Jump, there's stuff in Shonen Jump that runs weekly, and I do not know how anyone does something like that. I just don't. But the way the evidence shows you that the only way you can do something like that is if you are okay with having a heart attack at your desk.
Right.
The labor is a big problem. And I think that this working model, which I don't think has been attempted again in the same way, did help them a lot. But I also just think they were so talented, and like sometimes creative people collide like a supernova, and you just have to bask in it a little bit.
I'm going to say I don't think it's just the fact that these are the people involved, because every other time that DC has attempted to do a weekly series, when they did Countdown, when they did Batman Eternal, when they did the New 52, Future's End, they said, let's literally get like the most talented people we have access to and put them together. Let's create a new writer's room of our A-list. And those didn't work the same way. And I think it's because of that editorial oversight factor. Dan DiDio said it himself. The best thing he did for 52 was get out of the way. If 52 had stuck to its original mission statement of it needs to be the book that explains 1 year later, It would have been so bad.
Yeah.
They would have had to explain every decision that every individual book had made on an editorial level that had just not involved the writers at any point of the creative process. Their hands would be so tied that it would be impossible to tell any story, as we will see much later when they have their apology book that does that. We'll talk about World War III in 50 weeks.
It is very, very real that is the dark side of using fiction to try to plug up holes in your continuity.
Yeah.
Is that if you actually stick with that, sometimes you end up with a story that's just not very interesting to read because the answers to those questions just weren't that interesting. This is a comic where they just weren't handcuffed to it, and they could instead create more issues with the continuity and just drive full force ahead into telling a story that they really wanted to tell.
We're going to keep referring to the secret of 52, which is this key phrase that they keep repeating in the marketing material throughout the series. But the real secret of 52, I'm going to spoil it, is these creative giants were all given freedom to tell the story they wanted to tell. Yeah. That's why 52 works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our next question is from Jen, she, her. Jen writes, I used to run in circles where superhero comics were talked about, but never really got into them myself. However, one thing I'm fascinated by is the idea of ages in comics. Golden Age, Silver Age, etc. And how ubiquitous they are among fans for talking about the medium. Sure, Hollywood had its golden age, but I haven't seen film bros fighting about where the Bronze Age of movies begins and ends. What do you think about comics ages as a manifestation of superhero comics fandom? And do you see 52 as the beginning, end, peak, or nadir of any kind of comics age?
You know, I've thought about this. I don't know if there's a specific name for this age of comics that I would ascribe to it, but it does feel like the pre-MCU era, I would say. This is comic book writing in an age before superhero entertainment products would become the dominant form of entertainment in Hollywood. And I think that allows DC Comics to maneuver these characters in a slightly different way. They don't have to be constantly justifying why they're making enormous, really, really expensive movies about these characters. So their star writers can go and fiddle around over here and fiddle around over there. It's less of superheroes as a sort of a viable economic product and more of just sort of like DC being like, we literally have to keep this company alive. You know, I think at this point, DC had been in the red for an incredibly long period of time, and they were emerging from that, and sales were getting better. But they are now owned by the Warner Brothers Corporation. You know, like it's just very hard to make money from comics, and I think of this as a sort of flourishing of comic books at a time where everything really was on the bubble, and the kind of creativity that comes from desperation. And I love it. I think it's good.
Working off that, you've just put a lot of things into place for me. You've made some great points. I think what really defines this era that 52 is really the apex of and kind of begins, I'd say, around the 90s is this is the point where the people who are in charge of telling stories are the people who are huge fans of these characters. Like the Golden Age and Silver Age are defined by writers who got into comics because they were trying to break into science fiction or they didn't have other avenues of storytelling open to them. The people who are writing for DC in 2006, the superstars of Waid and Rucka and Morrison and Johns are here because there is nowhere else they would rather be.
Yeah.
They are telling the stories about the characters they always wanted to tell. It's the fan fiction writers in charge of the fiction. This is the super fan age.
Yeah.
This is the age where the inmates are running the asylum and they're telling stories only for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's why the period of, say, I would say 1986, the post-crisis, to just about now, 2007, the era we're discussing, is my favorite period in DC Comics history because it's the point where like the fans are running the show.
Yeah.
And they aren't beholden to anybody else about it. It's where you get the coolest, wildest storytelling. The
ideal vision of a creative community, right?
Yeah.
Where you are just here because you love it. And you're not trying to jump bored off of this onto making a movie, or you're not a Hollywood screenwriter who's being tapped to write a comic book because they want to elevate this character for a movie. You just like these characters and you love this history.
2008, literally the year after 52 ends. You get 2 movies. You get The Dark Knight, you get Iron Man.
Yeah.
Everything changes.
Everything, Iron Man especially, just it rearranges the economics of these books.
And The Dark Knight has DC going, we should make everything like Dark Knight.
Like, some poor choices were made.
Some choices. I won't ascribe a value on them.
Okay. Well, there were decisions. Decisions occurred. I just think that they are comic books with a capital C, capital B.
Oh, yes.
And I think that makes all the difference.
Ladies and gentlemen, comics.
All right, I think that's it for this episode, unless you have any last little comments you want to add.
Next time on 52 Pickup, we'll be reading issue 1 of 52.
Yes, so if you want to read along with us, grab that volume 1, read just the first issue and stop.
Yeah.
Which I know will be really hard because actually you can read comics very, very quickly. But we'll only be discussing the first issue. We will try to break it down and break down all the events. So if you don't want to read along, it won't be too difficult for you. But this podcast is a little bit of a book club, which I think is kind of fun. Alex, where can we find you on the internet and your other endeavors?
You can find me on Popverse, which is the pop culture blog arm of Read Pop, the convention organizer. I do some writing for them. You can find me on Blue Sky. I'm Alex Jaffe on Blue Sky. That's where you can find me for now. I am also the host of the Insert Credit Show, a video game podcast that's been going on since 2012, where I ask the smartest people in video games I know the stupidest questions I can think of.
It's a great show.
Terrific time.
It really is. So I'm Gita Jackson, and you can find me on Twitter, Threads by Meta, Blue Sky, Instagram, Tumblr. No, not Tumblr, actually. You can find me on everything except Tumblr as XOXO Gossip Gita, and you can find me on Tumblr as It's Gita Time. Because it's Gita time over there.
It's Gita time, baby.
And I am writing up a storm. I am working on a new video game review for Polygon. I am doing some journalism stuff.
Hit him with the Substack.
Roadmap. And I have a Substack where I'm also XOXO Gossip Gita. I've opened up paid subscriptions over there if you have any interest in supporting me. Thank you very, very much.
If you have an interest in supporting us, we're going to open up ways to do that soon.
Yes, you will absolutely have the ability to support us if you want to throw us some buckaroos, and we will have the details in the following episodes, hopefully. But yes, it's been wonderful to have a conversation about my favorite comic book of all time with you, Alex Jaffe.
I love talking about my favorite comic book with my favorite comic book journalist. This is a dream come true for me. I'm so happy this is happening. And now is the point I cannot wait for, the most exciting part of the show. Gita, you are about to unveil our signature sign-off.
Fuck. That's it. No. I was going to ask you, are you ready?
This has been 52 Pickup. Are you ready?
That's so good.
It's pretty good.
"52 Pickup" is an Aftermath production created by Gita Jackson and Alex Jaffe and edited by Esper Quinn, with original music by John Ahrens. If you'd like to follow along, you can check out 52 at your local comic book store or library, or the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. The views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the show's personalities and do not reflect those of DC Entertainment or Warner Brothers. Please rate and review our show wherever you can, and send your questions and comments to 52mailbag@gmail.com. Never stop reading comics.